I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the periodic table. Okay, we talked about the masses and where to find those on the periodic table, but why is the periodic table set up the way it is? So you might notice that this one is hyperlinked here. If you check out the Word document, you can follow this. The crash course on the periodic table is actually really good. And it describes essentially what Mendeleev did in order to figure out how to set up the periodic table. So it's not just randomly, it doesn't have that shape just randomly. It is that shape for a reason. And that's because what Mendeleev did is he actually started by grouping elements by similar properties, right? That would be a good way to group them. So grouped elements by similar properties. And essentially what he saw, properties, sorry, too many letters. What he saw was there was a pattern. So every, in his case, it was every 7 elements, at least for the smaller elements, sorry, my pen's not working. There we go. For the smaller elements, they would repeat every 7 elements. Now, we now know that it's 8 elements. They hadn't discovered the noble gases yet because they didn't react with anything. But essentially, every 8 elements for the first couple rows actually started repeating patterns. And then you got a whole bunch of metals in there, and it's not quite as, it's not 8 anymore. It's every like 18. So essentially, he did this. And then when he got to like the repeating pattern, he would start a new row. So started a new row at like similar properties. So similar properties. So what that means, the way that he figured it out is that anything that's in the same column has similar properties. The ones in the rows actually don't have similar properties. They just go by mass. But the ones in the columns are going to have similar properties. So we have words for these. The period is what we refer to a row as, and a group is a column. Okay, these guys do have similar properties. Okay, and there's some specific groups that you guys need to know. So this picture here is extremely useful. One thing that is not labeled clearly on here are the groups. So that's what I'm going to show you. So when I'm talking about group, remember that's a column. So we actually call this A1 and column A2. And then we skip the middle because there actually aren't any between like 4 and 5 and 12 and 13. And then this group over here is A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, and A8. They can also be numbered 1 through 18, that's fine. But the main groups, which are the A groups, have a lot of important properties, and those are the ones that we usually tend to focus on. So I'm going to put the A equals main groups. Okay, and their main group elements. So these all, like I said, have similar properties, and they have names. Okay, so these are actually labeled on here. So hopefully you printed yours off in color, and if you didn't print it off in color, then I would actually color these in. You need to know that group A1 or group 1 is the alkali metals. Okay, they're labeled with purple. Group A2 is the alkaline earth metals. They have specific properties that are similar. You need to know that group 7 or A7 or group 17 over there is the halogens. That's their name. Those are all those gases. And then group 8, A8 or 18 is the noble gases. And you may or may not know that they're called noble gases because they don't interact with things. They don't react. They're very non-reactive, just like nobles were back in the day. They don't react with the commoners. So that's why those are named the way they are. You can see they're kind of like earmarked on here. You do need to know those main groups. Okay. You also need to know that these are the transition elements. Right, and that the table can also be divided into metals, semi-metals, or metalloids, that's another name, and non-metals. Okay, so you can see that a majority of the table is actually metals. What we like to do is make this little stair step here, and then almost everything to the left side is a metal, except for hydrogen, and almost everything to the right side is a non-metal, and then include hydrogen in that non-metal. Okay, so those are kind of the ones that you need to know. So if I say halogens, you should know that I'm talking about the elements in group 17 or A7 over here. All right. So the ones I'm going to talk about first are the metals, semi-metals, and non-metals. They have specific properties, right? Because remember, these are grouped based on properties. So things about metals, and you should know or probably know most of these, that metals are lustrous or shiny. They are very good conductors of heat and energy. Conductors. That's why we use metals to conduct electricity. And almost all of them are solid at room temp, with very few exceptions, like mercury is a liquid at room temperature, but most everything else is going to be a solid at room temperature. Okay, so nonmetals are kind of the complete opposite. Most of them are gases, or they can be solids, like brittle solids. I'm just gonna write solid at room temperature. Okay, right, these are all gases over here, noble gases. Group A7 is mostly gases, oxygen, nitrogen, those are gases. But you still have some solids in here. We have carbon, phosphorus, sulfur. Those things are all going to be solids. So there's kind of two options there. They are very non-conductive, also known as insulators. Non-conductive. Another word for that is insulators. And they actually gain electrons easily. So I'm actually going to add up here to the metals that they lose electrons easily. Most of them like to become cations or positively charged, and most of the nonmetals like to gain electrons and become negative ions and negatively charged. So metalloids are like right in between. They've got properties of both groups, properties from both groups. They can be considered semiconductors, right in the middle. Okay, and those are along the stair step, along the, that quotes, the stair step. Okay, that's where you're gonna find those. Notice once you make your stair step, everything on top is a metalloid. Not everything on bottom is a metalloid. Aluminum, you should know that aluminum is a metal. Polonium, you don't have to know that one off the top of your head, but as long as you know that like these guys are the metalloids, they have properties of both, you should be good.